Hi everyone, welcome to the 16th chapter of Mary Stewart's Thornyhold. We're going to start off with reading the chapter and we're going to discuss it later at the end of the chapter. It was love at first sight, of course. I say of course because, and later I could see and prove how right I was, no woman who was more or less ordinarily impressionable could have come within his field without responding to it. The unexplainable and an extraordinary pull, not of personality, and that is too strong, it can and often does repel, nor of sexuality, of which the same can be said, but of what I can only call sheer magnetism, spiced with a combination of both. He was one of those people born sometimes to their pleasure, more often to their bane, to be a lodestone, a bright particular star. Literature and fiction are full of femme fatales, but there is also an homme fatale, an altogether rarer bird, and pity helps the lonely and impressionable female who comes within range of him. And when he asks her into his home, when his son takes to her and makes her free of his company, when he invites her to come and see him again, any time she feels inclined, pity help poor lonely spinster Gayless Ramsay. I rode home through the gently darkening autumn evening, my feet pumping away at the pedals over the rough forest track, my head in the clouds of sweet imagination, my brain completely dormant, till the track dipped sharply to ford a muddy rill. I met it wrongly, splashed myself to the knees with the black water, and came to, swearing. As I pushed the bicycle up the next rutted incline, the brain took over once more. So I felt like swooning into his arms, his bed, anything. But he was married with a 10-year-old son. He was a distinguished writer who had rented a lonely and uncomfortable house simply because he wanted solitude to write in. He had been polite to me because, mistaken my motives towards that silly, that ever-blessed sheep, he had startled me and been momentarily rude, because he was grateful to me for taking William off his hands. He had a son, and he was married, even if she had left him. How long ago? I must ask William. He was still married. And in my vicarage-written and already old-fashioned book, that put the whole idea out of the ring. My bright particular star was way beyond my wildest and most enchanted flight. His hair was thick and dark brown, with just the beginnings of grey. He must be what? About 40? Late 30s, perhaps? He would be in Who's Who, and I could look him up in the public library and get all his books to read. He was a couple of inches taller than me, just right, but he stooped a bit, probably with the hours spent over his desk. He liked solitude and the countryside. He was content with the little that rather bleak farmhouse offered. He was a loner, and so was I. He would be just as quiet and a good deal more comfortable when he moved into Thornyhold with me. He was married. And even if Who's Who says He was divorced. What makes you think he would ever look at you, Galis Ramsay? So come down to earth. You may be a witch elect, but it would take a stronger toil of grace than you could ever weave to catch and hold a man like Christopher Dryden. The white wicket gate was open. I coasted through it, past the protective clump of rowan and elder inside the bastion of the quickthorn hedge, to dismount at the shed. Hodge was sitting on the black window-sill and rose to greet me, stretching his front paws luxuriously and showing a wide pink yawn. "Anybody been around?" I asked him, and had my answer in the cat's unruffled demeanor. I let myself in, and he followed, purring. I fed him, then as soon as I had washed and put fresh plasters on my hands, I started work on the blackberries. At dusk, when they were simmering, there was a knock. Before I could get to it, I heard it open, so I knew who to expect. "You're in, then?" smiled Agnes Trapp. "Yes, do come in. How are you?" "Fine, thanks." She came in, sniffing. "Brambles? You making jelly?" "Yes, I really enjoyed myself. I love picking brambles." "You got your hands pretty badly scratched, didn't you?" "I'm afraid so." I stirred the fruit. She settled herself at the table. "Who told you about the quarry?" she asked. "William. How did you know I'd been at the quarry?" She ignored that, merely replying, "Oh, yes, they live just over the hill from there. Did you know that?" "I didn't know before today, but William's father came on me when he was out for his afternoon walk, and we got talking. William had told him about my being there at Thornyhold. I'd cut one of my hands rather badly, and he asked me back to the farm to get it tied up." Silence. I stirred the fruit again. "It seems a very lonely place, doesn't it?" I asked her. "Even for a writer. I mean, without anyone to look after the house." "As to that, I used to give him a hand now and then, but it's too far to go. There's a woman goes in now twice a week to clean up. Bessie Yelland, the farmer's wife from Blackcock's. Never sees him, she says. Writers are queer cattle, seemingly." "Asked you in, did he?" "Yes, I gathered he'd come to a stopping place in the book. Did you know his wife, Agnes, or did she leave him before he came to live hereabouts?" "Leave him?" She sounded surprised. I bit my lip. Perhaps I shouldn't have mentioned it. William told me. She left him. It must have been some time ago, surely. I don't know if it was for another man. Was there a divorce? William didn't say, and of course I couldn't ask him. "Yes, I knew. But it happened before he ever came here. I don't know why it happened. I never heard tell of a divorce. Mr. Dryden never talked about it." I went back to the fruit, stirring. Another silence, quite a long one. Then in a different tone, "Did you find the recipe?" she asked. "What recipe?" My mind had been a long way away. "Why, for the bramble jelly." She sounded impatient, almost to rudeness. I glanced at her. She was not looking at me. Her gaze was sweeping the kitchen, taking in the orderliness, the shining glass, the spotless enamel, the clean curtains and cushions, the flowers on the window-sill. There was a glitter in her eyes, a sort of force to her that I had not seen before. For a moment I wondered if my strenuous cleaning efforts could have offended her, but she had helped herself, and had shown no signs of offense, even over the scrubbing of the pigeon loft. "You said you'd look out her recipe book for me," she said. Oh, yes, of course. I remember you spoke of it, but I'm afraid I haven't had time to look for it yet. I'm just making this lot the usual way. I stirred the fruit again. I think they're about done. I'll let them strain now. Let me help you? Before I could protest, she was on her feet and at the cupboard. My, but you've been right through everything, haven't you? The place looks really smart and nice. This'll be the bowl, is it? No, let me. I let her. Together we spooned the pulp into the jelly bag, and together carried bowl and bag into the larder, and left the bag suspended to drip. She took in the scrubbed shelves, the clean racks, the food lying ready for supper. Oh, you got yourself some fish. But you'd like my soup, wouldn't you? I brought a can of my leek soup for you. It'll heat up a treat. How very kind, I said helplessly. But you mustn't spoil me, Agnes, really. I've got to learn to look after myself, you know. Back in the kitchen, she busied herself taking down a saucepan and tipping the contents of a blue enamel can into it. She gave me a quick smiling glance, as sharp as a bodkin. Looks to me as if you can do all right now, Miss Ramsay. You got this place lovely. Well, I said, and was annoyed to hear the almost apologetic tone in my voice. You know how it is. The rooms you'd done were fine, and when my own things arrived, I had to turn the place out, and one does like things arranged in one's own way, and it is the best way to find out exactly what there is in the house. I'd have thought there'd be a list, she said, along with the lawyer's papers. First thing they did was to send the valuation people along to go through everything. Then, as I was silent, well, wasn't there? Yes, I believe there was. I haven't had time to look through it yet. She set the pan gently down on the stove and turned. The tension, whatever it was, had vanished. Mr. Dryden had been right, I thought, and I had been over-wary. The thought of an inventory did not worry her. The reverse, it appeared to have relieved her mind. She said comfortably, She always was a tidy kind of body, your auntie. What about that still room of hers? You done that yet? Not yet, at least not properly. I've done the room, but I haven't checked the shelves yet. I really will look through those books tomorrow. It's the likeliest place for her, special recipes. In fact, there might be a list in the inventory, and if I find the book you want, I'll bring it down for you straight away. I'll take that kindly. Will you be going for more brambles for yourself? I hadn't thought about it, but if you want some, I'd love to go over there again if this weather holds. She pushed the lid back on her can with a rap and picked a carton off the back of her chair. Don't bother. There's a plenty where we live. You're no cold to go over there again. Enjoy your soup. It's our own leeks and cream added. And she went. As the back door shut, Hodge came out from under the chair where he had been hiding and went back to his saucer. Are you right, Hodge, or is Mr. Dryden? How, tell me this, did she know I'd been over to the quarry? And how did she know, because I swear she knew already, that I'd been to the farmhouse? And why was she anxious to stop my going there again? Hodge made no reply, but lifted his chin from the saucer and watched me as I lifted the pan of soup from the stove, watched me with interest and apparent approval as I crossed to the sink and tipped the lovely-smelling soup down the drain. It was absurd, and after what I had been told today, it was probably plain stupid, but I was remembering the pie that had smelled equally delicious, and the night when, after eating it, I had dreamed an appalling dream. And now, in spite of what William's father had meant as reassurance, I was recalling the old woman rocking behind the lace curtains in the window of the tiny lodge. If our Agnes was a witch, I would not trust any of her concoctions, and if she was no great shakes as a witch, I would trust them even less. So that's that, I said to Hodge, turning on the cold tap to wash the remains of the soup away. And perhaps we'll have a good night's sleep tonight, and no nightmares. The moon was high, and the night a still life of black and silver. I suppose it was tempting Providence to repeat my actions of that other night, but before getting into bed I crossed to the window to draw the curtains back, then opened the sash wide and leaned out to look at the night. Hod jumped to the sill beside me, and before I could stop myself I had taken hold of him. But tonight there was no magic in the air, no distant music, no wavering light, only the rich moon of autumn, almost at the full, standing clear above the end of the forest ride, and laying a bright path across the river. The owl hooted from somewhere near at hand. I looked that way. Nothing but the black mass of the forest trees, brushed here and there with the grey bloom of the moon. For the new witch of Thornyhold, tonight was, blessedly, just an ordinary night. No light-edged vision, nothing, and no sound now, except the steady purring of an ordinary cat. Under my hands, Hodge stiffened and started to pull back. The purring stopped abruptly. I let him go, and he dropped silently back into the room and slid like a shadow towards the bed. The fur was ridged along his back, and his eyes and ears were laid flat. Seconds later I heard what he had heard, the distant, insistent barking of a dog. For the first few nights of my stay at Thornyhold it had troubled me, but if some farmer or woodman kept his dog chained up, there was nothing to be done about it, so I'd closed my mind to it, and had grown used to the sound, and presently after a few nights it had stopped, and I'd forgotten it. Now it was here again, and sounding on the still night louder and much nearer, and now no longer barking, but howling like a wolf baying at the moon. An eerie sound, an uncomfortable sound, that brought the hairs brushing up along my arms, myself reacting just as the cat had done. I told myself it was nothing, an atavism, a primitive reaction to the wolf in the night, just as the dog itself was harking back, calling dog to dog, wolf pack to wolf pack, enjoying the only freedom a chained dog could have, the pleasure of communication with its kind. It was enjoying nothing. The howling broke off into a sharp cry of pain or terror, and a series of wild barking yelps, then silence. I found myself at the front door and running down the path to the front gate before I even knew I had moved. Not that there was anything I could do. There was no way that I was going adventuring into the woods in the middle of the night. That was for heroines. Not for sensible me, but something in the sensible me had responded, violently and without thought, to the dog's scream of pain. So here I was at the wicket gate, groping in the darkness to find the latch. The moon was clear of the trees, and beyond the shadow of the thorn edge the driveway was as light as a winter's day. I saw him even before I heard him. Jessamy Trapp, running towards me, his footsteps muffled on the moss of the driveway, his breathing ragged and sobbing. Then I saw how he was running, with one shoulder hunched, his left forearm held tightly to the chest, and his other hand gripping it so that his body was crooked, and he lurched as he ran. He had not seen me. He was heading for the path at the side of the house and the short cut to the hedge. "Jessamy!" He checked with a gasp of fright, turned, saw me, and came slowing to a walk, still hunched over that arm. "What's happened? What is it? Are you hurt?" "Oh, miss..." It was not just breathlessness. He was sobbing, swallowing tears. He sounded much younger than his years, like a hurt child. He held his arms out in front of him for me to see. He still clutched the left forearm with his other hand, and now between the fingers I could see an ooze of black.
He bit me bad. It hurts. Got me in the arm, he did.
You'd better come in. We'll clean it up and take a look at it. Come. No questions. They could come later. He followed me into the kitchen, sat where I pointed, at a chair by the table, and waited docilely while I ran a basin of hot water. Thanking my lucky stars that Cousin Galis had believed in conventional medicine as well as her still-room remedies. I lifted her first aid box down from its place and proceeded to wash Jessamine's arm clean. It was a nasty wound. The deep bruised punctures of a sharp bite. Jessamy, his tears dried now, and some sort of stoicism returning as shock dwindled, watched with shrinking interest, then finally with a kind of pride.
It be bad, miss?
It's a nasty bite. Now tell me what happened. Not your own dog, surely?
No. Don't have no dog. Ma don't like them. Dirty things.
Vermin, yes. Well, whose dog and why?
Just a dog. Stray dog, likely. Letting him out, but he bit me.
Out of where? I saw that in a fist clenched against the pain of the bitten arm he held a tuft of black hairs. A trap, was it? Hang on now, Jessamy. This might hurt. Does someone set traps in the woods? A gasp as the antiseptic bit into the wounds, then a vigorous nodding.
That's right. A trap. Gypsy settin' likely. I let him out, and then he bit me. Savage he was.
Where was this? There was a sort of hesitation in the look he slid sideways at me. A vague gesture of the uninjured hand took in the woods to the west.
Up there in the woods, over to the big house.
Well, you can show me tomorrow, maybe. I was thinking anxiously about Hodge. Traps was something I would certainly have to see about. You got the dog out all right? Why did he bite? Was he hurt?
Don't think so. Didn't see. He ran.
I finished tying the bandage. There you are. That's the best I can do, and it should be all right for now. You'd better see a doctor in the morning.
She don't have no truck with that sort. Does her own. She'd be main mad at me if she knew. Say it served me right.
You should get it seen to, though. How do you feel now?
Fine. That hurts a little bit, but fine.
The anxious child's look came back.
You won't tell her, miss? See, if I pull the sleeve down, she'll never know.
There was no point in arguing. He did look better. The pallor of fright had gone, and the wound was clean. I tipped the stained water away and lifted the top of the stove. All right. Hand me the rags, will you? I'll burn them. And those dirty hairs, is that all? There. Well, let me see it again in the morning, and we'll decide then about a doctor. He flashed me that brilliant smile so like his mother's, and smoothed the sleeves carefully down over the bandage, while I made him a mug of strong, sweet tea and cut him a slice of the cake I had baked yesterday. I did ask another question or two, but got no answers that made sense, and eventually it occurred to me to wonder just what Jessamy had been doing in the woods at that time of night. Visiting traps that he himself had set seemed likely, but nothing was to be done or said tonight. Tomorrow we should see. So I gave up and let him eat and drink in smiling silence, till presently he left me to lock up and go to bed, once more in search of that peaceful and dreamless night. I think this chapter is probably, it follows that very, very well-known trope of love at first sight, almost. Gilly falls head over heels for Christopher Dryden. To her, it seems like he's the culmination of everything that she has been seeking, which he probably is when she starts really looking at it. We see her kind of dissecting the situation, everything about him, to see how they really match up to her. But the funniest thing about it is that everything that she goes through, it's the same that, whether you're a teenager falling in love or you are in the mid of your life and falling in love, you still go through these same things. Your head's in the clouds, you're kind of floating around in this warm glow of loving someone, dare I say. And we see Gilly on her bike ride back to her house doing exactly that. The inner struggle she constantly has of the prim, proper girl who is supposed to follow all the rules, who is not supposed to covet somebody who is already married. And then the other girl who starts thinking about how in every which way Christopher Dryden is the perfect fit for her and her life and the situation she's in. And of course, she doesn't deny the fact that there is a certain magnetic quality about him which attracts her. I personally used to really like this chapter. Of course, this is a culmination of a long story line where we just get to know a little bit about Christopher Dryden having sent over some eggs from the farm. And we know that Gilly's relationship with William is coming to something. It is amounting to something. And we find that it's Christopher. And for me, love at first sight was... It is definitely a literary trope. I do not think it exists in real life. Of course, everybody listening to this, you can disagree with me, and if you have fallen in love at first sight, please do let me know. I would love to hear the stories. For me, any feelings of endearment had to develop slowly and over time. I would not be aware of any attraction at the beginning to someone, even if they were well known to be an attractive person. So it was interesting to see my worldview and a literary character's worldview slowly starting to converge at one point of time, where when you actually do acknowledge your attraction to a person, all of the ways in which you want that person to be your perfect fit, that all comes up. So everything in the first 2 pages of this chapter that Gilly goes through, I recognize personally. I've done that, and I've had my head in the clouds, and then I've had this whole split personality argument going on where one part of me wants to just float around in this warm and bright, glowing atmosphere of love, and the other one extremely realistic, who understands the situation, trying to bring that part of me down. So I really enjoy that conversation that she has with herself. And it's brought about by that imagery as well. Like, till then she was cycling back to her home, everything in the atmosphere was perfect, and then she hits a rut in the road. And the fact that she does have these kind of very realistic fights with herself also makes me hopeful for her, because that goes to show that she's not going into this blind and not as a very immature woman, but she is looking at it from the point of view of, wouldn't it be nice if this could happen? It's the perfect follow-on chapter from the previous one, where she was a bit of a damsel in distress. And it also, the other thing is, it is a short chapter, but Mary Stewart followed a very interesting process. She does not let her main character wallow in this kind of a feeling for the whole chapter. There's a quick cut of Agnes's appearance. We see some very interesting behavior which diverts Gilly's mind. And then there is a very different turn to the story in the second half, when the atmosphere is probably set for another advent of the witches kind of a night, and it turns to something very real. A dog in pain, and then Jessamy Trapp showing up, needing her help, and Gilly is able to kind of go back and fall back into her whole healer mode again, which probably is the best thing that this chapter could have done, because at no point in time does Mary Stewart make her heroines simpering, lovesick fools. They are always up and about and ready to get to what needs to be done. So, yes, I'm sure everybody's feeling that there is a build-up that is happening with all of the character interactions, and I will just say, listen on. Thank you very much for staying with me. I know it's been a long time, and a long gap between when I last posted and now. I am hoping to get some quick chapters out pretty soon. Thank you and goodbye.